Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Slow English Stories. I am Lio, your storyteller and teacher. Today, I have a special story for you. Are you someone who is afraid to make mistakes? Do you wait for the perfect moment before you start a new project? Well, today's story about a secret workshop will change how you think about success. As we go through the story, I will stop to explain some important words and grammar rules to help you improve your English. Let's begin. The sun was rising over the village of Oakhaven. Inside an old wooden workshop, the air was thick with the scent of wet earth. Let me explain the word scent. It simply means a smell, usually a pleasant or good one. The room was filled with clay. Clay is a type of heavy, wet mud that artists use to make plates and pots. An old teacher named Professor Silas stood before his students. He was a master of pottery. He decided to try a strange experiment. He divided the students into two groups. To the first group, he gave a difficult task. You must create only one pot, he said, but it must be flawless. Now, listen to that word. Flawless. It comes from the word flaw, a mistake, and less, without. So, flawless means perfect, without any mistakes. He told them they had 30 days to make this one perfect pot. To the second group, he gave a different rule. I do not care about beauty, he whispered. I want quantity. The word quantity means the amount or the total number of things. You must make 100 pots in 30 days to pass this class. Before we continue, let the sentence, he divided the students. The word divided ends in ed. This is the past simple tense. We use this grammar to talk about actions that started and finished in the past. It is the most important tense for storytelling. The students in the first group, the perfectionists, sat down and began to think. They did not touch the clay. They were too afraid to fail. But the second group, the makers, ran to their wheels. The wheels began to spin with a loud whirring sound. The days passed quickly. In one corner of the workshop, the perfectionists were still talking. They were debating the perfect temperature for the oven. They were paralyzed by fear. When you are paralyzed, it means you are so scared or stuck that you cannot move or take action. They wanted their first attempt to be their best. The days passed quickly. In one corner of the workshop, the perfectionists were still talking. They were debating the perfect temperature for the oven. They were paralyzed by fear. When you are paralyzed, it means you are so scared or stuck that you cannot move or take action. They wanted their first attempt to be their best. In the other corner, the makers were covered in mud. Their first pots were lopsided. This word, lopsided, describes something that is uneven or heavier on one side than the other. Their 10th pots were still a bit clumsy. When a movement is clumsy, it is not smooth. It is awkward. But look at the grammar here. Their 10th pots were better than their first. We use the word better to compare two things. This is a comparative adjective. We don't say gooder, we say better. By the 15th day, a change happened. The makers were not just making pots. They were learning. Every time a pot broke, they learned why. They began to adjust the speed of the wheel. To adjust means to change something slightly to make it work better. They were making faster progress. Notice that we added to the word fast to compare their speed now to their speed before. While the makers reached their 50th pot, the perfectionists finally touched the clay, but their hands were shaking. They were so worried about making a mistake that the clay felt like stone. The makers, however, were laughing. For them, a mistake was just a lesson. Their 80th pots were smoother and stronger than the 50th. By the 90th pot, the makers didn't even have to think. Their hands moved with mastery. Mastery is a noun that means you have become an expert at a skill. They were no longer afraid of the clay. They were friends with it. The 30th day arrived. It was time for the final judgment. The professor walked toward the perfectionists. They had only one pot. It was thin and weak. Then, he walked toward the makers and looked at their 100th pot. The room went silent. The 100th pot was glowing in the morning light. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever seen. But how did the messy group create the most beautiful pot? Professor Silas picked up the maker's 100th pot. It was breathtaking. This word, breathtaking, describes something so beautiful or amazing that it feels like you cannot breathe for a second. Look at this, the professor said to the whole class. The perfectionist spent 30 days trying to imagine the best pot, but the makers spent 30 days creating it. Look at that word best. It is a superlative adjective. We use good for one, better to compare to, and the best when something is at the top of everything else. The perfectionists looked at their thin, weak pot, and then at the maker's masterpiece. A masterpiece is the greatest work an artist ever makes. One student from the perfectionist group whispered, "But we tried so hard not to fail." Professor Silas smiled kindly. "That was your mistake. You treated failure as an enemy." The word failure means a lack of success or when something does not go as planned. But for the makers, every failure was a teacher. Their 20th pot taught them about balance. Their 50th pot taught them about strength. By the time they reached their 100th pot, they had perfected their skill. The students finally realized the truth. To realize means to suddenly understand a situation or a fact. They understood that you cannot reach the 100th perfect step without walking through the 99 imperfect ones. The makers had achieved success because they were not afraid to get their hands dirty. To achieve means to successfully finish something through hard work. In this part of the story, we see the present perfect grammar. They have perfected their skill. We use have or has plus a past participle to show that an action in the past is the reason for a result we see right now. The lesson was clear. If you want to speak English perfectly, you must first be okay with speaking it imperfectly. You must make your 100 mistakes to find your 100th perfect sentence. And that is the end of our story today. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Pottery Paradox. Remember, don't be afraid of the ugly pots in your life. Each mistake is just gold filling the cracks of your experience. If you found this story helpful, please subscribe to Slow English Stories. To subscribe means to sign up to receive updates from a channel. Also, hit the like button and tell me in the comments, what is one thing you are afraid to start because you want it to be perfect? I am Lio, and I will see you in the next story. Keep practicing, and keep making mistakes. Goodbye.